Hi guys, I apologize again for getting this video up late this week. My son has had some medical issues and I've been to the doctor several times this week and yeah, quite the week. Anyway, I hope you're safe, warm, and nobody ran into anybody on the icy roads yesterday. But I want to go over chapter 5. I'm going to be making this 2 videos. I promise they're short, so please watch them. They're 7 minutes tops is like what I can do to get them to post. So I talk kind of quickly, but I want to hit the highlights of chapter 5. Chapter 5 is actually my favorite chapter in the book, partially because it helps us understand why medical providers maybe aren't the best at communication. And it helps us cut them some slack, because when we begin to understand the background and the history of medicine, we begin to see that there are some problematic things that have to do with how they interact with their patients. And some of it is totally not their fault. So I hope this chapter lets you have a little more compassion for care providers and helps you to establish more trust and maybe being open to making things better, whether you're going to work in this field or whether it's for your own doctor-patient benefit. All right, so first of all, the emphasis on science when it comes to medicine is fairly new in our history. Actually, in the early 1900s, there was a campaign to combat what they called folk science, or like just unorthodox cures that made no sense, that weren't based on science. We've all heard of old wives' tales, things you can do to make yourself better. But in the early 1900s, they were like, no. We need to start looking at science. And as people knew better, they did better. Okay? So there was something called the Flexner Report. And it was prior to 1900, most medical schools were run as private businesses and there was no accountability. These schools were more orientated to profit than rigorous education. But the Flexner Report found that all but 5 medical schools had graduated people in need of a much greater education regarding science and biology. So in other words, most people graduating from medical schools were lacking in the area of science. So this report kind of blew a whistle on the quality of healthcare, and it kind of changed the game, okay? And with that report and with those changes, there became a decline of holistic and folk type medicines. And for the most part, the doctors that did these things weren't prepared to argue for their approach versus the scientific approach, okay? So by this point, the 1900s, Americans had overwhelmingly turned in the direction of science. They said, we want the real science. And so the only ones that have really survived that, although I would argue recently in the last 10, 20 years, alternative medicine has made a breakthrough. But osteopathy and chiropractic care did manage to make it through the scientific vetting. People have still believed in it, though it doesn't have a lot of scientific backup. So this led to basically a science-based curriculum for all medical schools. Few people challenge or question science. However, some feel they should also concern themselves with ethical matters and social skills. Unfortunately, that was not a push for most of the 19th century, okay, going into the 20th century. Social skills, communication, comfort, nurturing, the patient was not the priority. Again, it was going back to the biomedical approach. Do you remember we talked about that in the beginning, where your body's a machine and we need to fix it? Your carburetor is loose or your transmission needs to be replaced. Like, you're a machine and we need to look at you as a machine. That doesn't leave a lot of room for compassion, nurturing. How do you feel about your condition? So that whole touchy-feely communication aspect hasn't really been a priority, okay? Compassionate elements are overwritten when we think of our body as a machine. When you think of your body as a machine and a doctor thinks of you as a machine in need of being fixed, he's hyper-focused on exactly what's wrong, okay? My son has a scar, his old J-tube scar, and he's had it for 22 years. And unfortunately, the last year, it's been breaking through like a hole. A pathway's come out of it, and it's gotten severely infected to where I've been terrified that he's like sepsis or going to die overnight or whatever, because if you get a blood infection, it can quickly go through your body. Anyway, I got to see a surgeon today, but when I began to explain to him how scared I was when something's hot and oozing infected stuff and somebody has a fever, I mean, your first thought is run to the ER. And he just seemed really, okay, you're scared. It's just a wound. It's just a surface skin infection. Do you want me to cut it out? I can cut it out because of this. And I honestly felt like he just didn't take into account that there's been several nights I went to sleep thinking I probably shouldn't be here. I probably should be in the ER with my son. And I was hoping he'd have a little more compassion for that, but he's got good reviews. He's a great surgeon. I'm sure he'll take care of my son's machine. He will take care of his body and do the right thing, but he really wasn't overly concerned about me. Okay? So, I'm going to stop here, upload this, and go on to a second video. This may end up being 3 videos. I hope not. Okay? Thank you for sticking with me. Please watch these. I try to make them short. I heard a rumor that a lot of students don't watch their lecture videos from their instructors. I'm hoping that's not mine. Of course it's not. I love you. You love me. So you're going to listen to these. Thanks. Part 2 coming up.